On this episode of China Unscripted, Hong Kong is under threat, and so is anyone who supports Hong Kong, no matter where they are in the world. Welcome to China Unscripted. I'm Chris Chappell.
I'm Shelley Zhang.
And I'm Matt Ganeshta.
And joining us once again is Benedict Rogers, co-founder and chief executive of Hong Kong Watch and wanted fugitive. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So, Hong Kong authorities have threatened you, a British citizen, with life imprisonment for violating the Hong Kong national security law. Why don't you tell us what happened? Tell us the story.
Yeah, well, about a month ago, we realized that our website, the website of Hong Kong Watch, was blocked in Hong Kong, or at least partially blocked. People found ways around it, but people were informing us that it was blocked on a number of servers. And we press released that, and we, I think quite legitimately, made an inquiry to the Hong Kong government to ask what the explanation for blocking our website was. Obviously, we could guess, but we wanted to hear from them. And then about a week ago, we did hear from them. And I woke up in the morning to receive actually two letters. Firstly, a letter from the Hong Kong police, and then that was followed by an email from the Hong Kong National Security Bureau. But they both effectively said the same thing, which is that our website, and by implication the organization, poses a threat to China's national security, violates Hong Kong's national security law, and that as the co-founder and chief executive of the organization, I was personally held responsible. They wanted us to take down the entire website within 72 hours of receiving their letters, and failure to comply would result in anything between, one letter said between a year and life imprisonment. The other one said 3 years and life imprisonment, and a fine of 100,000 Hong Kong dollars, which is the equivalent of about 13,000 US dollars.
Well, I mean, hey, at least they gave you a chance to right your wrongs before having to go to jail for life.
Yes, I that's right. But obviously, we've chosen not to take that option.
Why wouldn't you just give in to pressure? Wouldn't that have been a little easier?
I think that would have been the worst thing to do. I think that would simply encourage them to use this kind of tactic against many others around the world, and then eventually, even yourselves would be offline if they continued.
I mean, there's so many crazy things with this story. I mean, just first of all, the idea that now, people have been concerned that, China's Great Firewall would come to Hong Kong, that, the outside internet would be essentially cut off. Do you know of many other, websites that have been blocked in Hong Kong the way Hong Kong Watch has been?
I know of a number of others, but I don't think I'm aware of any other foreign organization. I think it's mostly been websites by Hong Kong groups.
I mean, you should really feel proud. You are making so many firsts. You were essentially the first Westerner to be denied entry to Hong Kong. That was before the national security law, right?
That's right. That was back in 2017.
This is essentially the first Western website that's been blocked in Hong Kong, and you were the first Westerner to be targeted by the national security law.
Did you do something to Carrie Lam? Did you somehow offend somebody personally? It seems very much like they've decided to target you specifically.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, obviously, I have been quite critical of Carrie Lam. It's also one amusing development linked to this, and I don't know if there's a direct link, but about maybe a month or 6 weeks or so ago, you remember the case of Christine Lee, the person who MI5 accused of infiltrating and basically spying for the Chinese regime in the British Parliament and the British political system. And I had commented on that. And in response to that, Regina Ip, a prominent Hong Kong pro-Beijing politician, former Secretary for Security, tweeted saying that it was outrageous that the UK was accusing Christine Lee of these things. And if the UK insisted on doing so, Hong Kong should, in retaliation, apply the same charges to me. And now they have. So
This is
Wait,
interesting.
Specifically you, like she said you in the tweet.
she said me in the tweet. Yeah.
Wow.
I'm trying to follow the logic of what you said, but it makes no sense to me.
No. I get it. You know, it's clearly something personal with you, Benedict. And you know what they say: hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. What did you do to Carrie Lam? I think you broke her.
And Regina Ip? Both?
Well, I'm assuming she's acting on behalf
Okay.
of Carrie Lam, like when you get your friends to.
Oh, okay.
So what did you do, Heartbreaker?
Well, actually, when I lived in Hong Kong many years ago, I lived there for the first 5 years after the handover from 97 to 2002. And I worked as a journalist then. And I remember I did write some articles very critical of Regina Ip at the time. And I wonder if she has a long memory. I do remember she complained to my editor at the time. That was at the time when Hong Kong was still a free and open city under one country, two systems. And my editor's response was just to laugh and told me about it. But so Regina Ip and I go back a long way, I guess.
So do you know her personally?
I don't at all. I've never met her.
Have you met Carrie Lam?
No, I haven't.
It feels like Regina Ip is the kind of person who would probably remember a journalist who, criticized her.
Yeah, I think that's the only explanation, is that she secretly had a crush on you and your articles broke her heart.
This was going in a different direction than I thought, because I was like, hey, Benedict, are you in the CIA? Like that would be, I would assume the next accusation, right?
Well, CIA doesn't make sense. Wouldn't it be MI6?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but they obviously work together.
Yeah, we're together. Before the podcast started, I told you we aren't the BBC, so this is clearly not the kind of interview you normally get. But so to get us back on track, I think like a lot of people will hear this as, well, first of all, I think a lot of people aren't necessarily clear on the fact that the Hong Kong national security law technically applies to everyone on the planet. You were the first, but technically anyone could be charged with breaking the national security law and, being charged a fine or being sentenced to life in prison. This really, and now I think a lot of people would think that's laughable. Like you're probably not going to end up in a Hong Kong prison for life. But this is a really clear example of how China uses legal warfare against the world. And I think we need to talk about why this is actually a really worrying development.
Yeah, absolutely. As you say, I think it's their ability to enforce this is very limited. I think in practical terms, probably the one thing I do need to be careful of in a worst case scenario is travel to countries that have extradition agreements with Hong Kong or China.
Like Russia.
Like Russia, exactly.
Yeah. There's Kazakhstan, Belarus, there's a few of these great nations that have extradition treaties. Mongolia.
Yes.
If you're trying to get close to China, yeah.
That's right. I assume North Korea probably as well, but
there goes your North Korea vacation plans. I'm sorry.
Exactly. But as you say, the National Security Law, Article 38, I think it is, says that you can be anywhere in the world. You don't have to be a resident of Hong Kong to be in breach of the national security law. It's the extraterritoriality clause. And we all commented on that when the law was first imposed and said this was a very dangerous article in the law. But I don't think I ever believed that they really would go this far as to use it. I thought that the bigger danger would be for exiled Hong Konger groups. I thought they would be the most likely targets. But to use it for the first time against a foreign national and a foreign organization is, quite a surprise.
I was really upset when I heard this story. When I heard they sentenced you to life in prison for violating the national security law, I was furious. Why not us?
Yes.
Right?
Well, I'm so okay. In terms of, now that you, as a UK citizen living in London, are targeted, or I don't know if charged is technically the right word, but essentially charged with violating the law. But let's say you don't go to Russia or Kazakhstan or any of the other 20-something countries that have those extradition treaties, right? So they're not going to nab you from those countries. But what could they do to you in the UK, if anything?
Well, as far as I understand it, there's very little they can do to me in the UK, particularly as the British government suspended its extradition agreement as soon as the national security law came in 2020. And B, the British government has been extremely supportive of us in the last few days. The Foreign Secretary, Liz Truss, issued a very strong statement on the day that the story broke. So I think probably the only threat that we do have to be mindful of in the UK is the cybersecurity issue. If they want us to take down our website and we refuse to do so, will they try and do it themselves? That's something we need to be aware of, and other forms of cybersecurity threats are a possibility. Although so far, thankfully, nothing has happened. And I should say our social media, as far as I know, is still live in Hong Kong, hasn't been taken down. I haven't had any follow-up from the authorities in Hong Kong. And you're right to say that charged is probably not the right word. Threatened or accused is probably a better term, because as far as I know, I haven't yet been legally charged. I've been warned that I could be.
There's something I just kind of don't understand about the way that they've gone about this, which is, essentially it seems like they sent you these letters as a threat, to try to make you take down your website. In 72 hours, if you don't, then you could be accused of this. But then you just turned around and publicized this, right? And what are they going to do next? Are they going to actually go through with the kind of farce of trying to charge you under the national security law? Like, it seems that this is kind of stupid on their point. Am I not seeing something that they get out of this?
Well, that's right. And there are several other aspects of it that are really quite laughable. One is the particular accusation is that we're guilty of collusion with foreign political entities. But we are a foreign political entity. So are we colluding with ourselves? Are we colluding with our elected representatives in the UK? And the other thing is, as we've already said, they denied me entry and effectively banned me from Hong Kong in 2017. So they would have to unban me before they could imprison me, because they were currently I'm not allowed into Hong Kong. So I'm not sure how I can serve my sentence if they wanted me to.
So this national security law, this threat they're using under it is basically, it sounds to me like it's the way that they treat people in China, right? Which is that they threaten you and they assume that you're like 99.9% of people in China who give in to the threat because they realize that if they don't, the consequences are very immediate and very serious. And so they just use the same tactic, not realizing that you have an alternative. This
right. And that's exactly the pattern that I've experienced over the last several years, because they've done this time. But previously, I received, and we talked about this on a previous episode, I received various threatening letters, not only to my home address, but also to my neighbors, my employers, and also to my mother, who lives in a different part of the UK. And that's the kind of tactic they use in mainland China to threaten people through their families, their neighbors, their employers. And of course, given the system in China, it is effective there. But the idea that they think it would work in London is extraordinary. And they're following the same playbook again.
It's amazing. They threatened your mother.
Yes. She received several letters. Basically, they were not threatening her as such, but they were asking her to tell me to stop doing what I'm doing. And thankfully, my mother is A, very supportive of what I do, and B, has a good sense of humor. And she just laughed and said, well, I gave up trying to do that many years ago.
Wait, did she actually reply to them?
No. Well, the other thing was
that would be hilarious, though.
Yeah, and the funny thing with these letters is they were anonymous, and there was no. So they were asking my neighbors to keep an eye on me and monitor my activities. But I'm not sure if my neighbors did want to do that. I'm not sure who they would have reported back to, because there was no address on the letter.
So weird.
Just shout it into the sky.
It's like they've got their playbook, but like they've only thought through like the first half of it.
I mean, like it would make sense if you had like a neighborhood committee, or like they have in China, where like everybody kind of is supposed to like monitor, and like people who cause trouble are there's a mechanism to get people in trouble that way. But there's not really that kind of thing here.
Well, I mean, there's Twitter.
Because there is Twitter. But I think like the point is not to be effective, but to create a climate of fear.
That is true.
These people somehow have your address. I remember you said there was one time like somebody knew like what hotel you were staying at on one of your trips. So
that's right.
Yeah. So this is like to intimidate people, like to, sort of the soft power, friendly panda image of China is kind of fading away, and they're now, exposing the panda's claws and its deadly sting.
The deadly sting?
Wait, pandas sting?
I don't know a lot about biology, but
they're poison venom glands.
So yes, thank you, Matt. We're now seeing the Communist Party's poison panda venom glands. There was a little too much alliteration in there for me to pronounce. We're not the BBC.
But the panda's bark is worse than its bite.
I wonder. Actually, no, pandas have a pretty powerful bite, I think.
But how about their bark?
I don't know what kind of vocalizations.
Do they make sounds?
We should have a cutaway to what a panda sounds like. But yeah, seriously, this is the Chinese Communist Party trying to assert itself globally in a way that they haven't really done before. And even though
I think they have. This is the thing.
Yeah.
Like that the news that broke this past week about the U.S. Department of Justice charging Chinese nationals, right, with essentially trying to intimidate, harass Chinese Americans who are Chinese dissidents. Mm-hmm. Did you see this? Where they basically, there was this one guy who was an artist who made a statue that showed Xi Jinping as a coronavirus, and they tried to burn that statue down. They tried to harass this one guy who had been a Tiananmen Square massacre survivor who went on to try to run for Congress in the U.S. And his daughter is actually a U.S. Olympic figure skater. And they tried to harass him, monitor him, hired private investigators to try to find out where these people lived, dig up any dirt on them. There was somebody who kind of appeared to be a confidant to some of these pro-democracy people, and then was secretly reporting all this to the Chinese Communist Party. So the stuff that they have goes back years.
Well, the difference is this is going from targeting Chinese dissidents who live abroad to now just trying to target everyone, writing letters to your poor mother, or supposedly sentencing you to life in prison. That is an escalation.
I think that is an escalation, but I wonder if they've basically miscalculated.
Interesting. What do you think, Benedict?
Yeah, I think they probably have miscalculated. I mean, all these things, what I've experienced, the cases you've been describing, also the kind of wolf warrior diplomacy that we've seen in recent years, I think have been counterproductive for them. I mean, I remember some years ago before Xi Jinping, and even in the early years of Xi Jinping, there was so much kind of goodwill among the West to China. In the UK, we had the so-called golden era of Sino-British relations. And my job was much harder then because so many people didn't want to rock the boat, didn't want to damage relations with China. Now I think we're seeing I mean, it's not enough, and there's a long way still to go. But we are seeing people waking up and rethinking the relationship with China. We're seeing that definitely in the UK, in the US, and across parts of Europe. And I think that's partly because of what the regime has done to Hong Kong. It's partly because of the evidence of what's happening to the Uyghurs getting more attention. But it's also partly, I think, because of the increasingly aggressive behavior of the regime externally. And that has woken people up.
Yeah, I wonder if this is them just not realizing that, the tactics they use against Chinese people don't work. Like, they were very good at trying to buy off and influence the West in a variety of ways. But yeah, particularly with Hong Kong, I don't know if they expected how bad that would make them look. And then once they started getting attacked, they're communists. They don't really know how to respond to that except for viciously lashing out. So I wonder if they're just stuck in this loop.
It's America's fault. Obviously, These were all CIA people.
Yeah, and so now they don't know how to handle. It was easy when they could just buy people off, and it was golden era, friendly, win-win mutual cooperation. But now they're in this kind of death spiral of just lashing out in ways that actually will not. They haven't successfully threatened you. They've just made themselves look like idiots.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I want to touch on something that you brought up earlier, Chris, which is the legal warfare. Which is, I would say there's kind of two different types of legal systems, broadly speaking. And one is, I would kind of call it the UK legal system, which is, starting with Magna Carta and the whole thing that sort of evolved over the last few centuries, which is that there's this rule of law and there's a specific set of rules. And, if you commit a crime, you have a sort of trial. And if you are found to have put your toe past the line, you can be found guilty. But if you haven't put your toe past the line, you're found not guilty. And it's sort of designed to protect the innocent. The other type of legal system, broadly speaking, is a communist legal system, which is that you have a country where the government is controlled by the party and not by whatever's written in their constitution, which could be a quasi-phony constitution. So it's actually the parties controlling the government and controlling the courts. And so they're using law as a system to have the appearance of rule of law, but it's actually rule by law. So they're using this law as a tool to go after people, but it's actually the party's tool to target the people they want to target. And it has often very little to do with what we in the West would consider crimes. Now, here's the problem. You've got two very different legal systems. And to even call them legal systems is the beginning of the problem. Because when you start to think, oh, well, that's illegal according to Chinese law, then there starts to be this, when you use the same term for things, it starts to blend the meanings. And I think what the Communist Party is trying to do is use their communist rule by law system to kind of spread around the world to get people to start recognizing Chinese law as being legitimate in some way. And I think it's a process that could take decades, but I think that's what they want to do is push their legal system around the world, which always gives authoritarians control at the expense of protecting the innocent. And so this is a kind of legal warfare. And another example of that would be the law that they passed recently that allows Chinese vessels to open fire in the South China Sea if they're targeted, right? And it's illegal because it's the South China Sea, which is international waters, but it's legal according to China's law because that's Chinese territory. And I feel like that's kind of the same thing as the Hong Kong national security law, using this legal warfare, using this appearance of a legal system to then spread the Communist Party's rule by law around the world.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And it's very clear that they, as you say, they have their own understanding of of law and absolutely no respect for what we would call the international rules-based order. I mean, they sign up to numerous treaties, not least, of course, the Sino-British Joint Declaration, which is an international treaty registered at the United Nations that is valid until 2047, the first 50 years from the handover. But they've basically effectively torn it up. They say it's a historic document that is not relevant today. And they do the same with other international treaties that they're signatories to, but choose not to abide by. And the other thing that's happened in Hong Kong itself is, Hong Kong was until recently very much a place that prided itself in the rule of law and independent judiciary and so on. And now we're seeing that really undermined. The judiciary is certainly not independent. It's under political pressure to deliver the verdicts and sentences that the authorities want. And crucially, in the national security law cases, I believe I'm correct in saying that none of, or certainly almost all of those who are in prison under the national security law pre-trial have been held for many months ahead of their trial and denied bail. And bail used to be a very normal, expected part of legal proceedings in Hong Kong. So that's quite significant. I always remember the one of Hong Kong Watch's patrons, the former British Foreign Secretary, Sir Malcolm Rifkind, who was the Foreign Secretary in the last couple of years before the handover of Hong Kong. He tells a story of talking with his Chinese counterpart, the Chinese foreign minister, and he made the point about the importance of the rule of law. And the Chinese foreign minister said, yes, we also believe in the rule of law. In China, the people must obey the law. And Malcolm Rifkind said, no, you don't understand. It's not just the people. The government must obey the law as well. The government is under the law. And his Chinese counterpart looked as if he was from another planet and couldn't understand that concept at all. And so, as you say, they apply rule by law, not rule of law.
Yeah. So as a sort of instructive lesson, help us understand how Hong Kong went from rule of law to now rule by law, at least in the national security cases. Because, I would think that Hong Kong, having been established so long as this free and independent city, you'd have lawyers, you'd have prosecutors like district attorneys or their equivalent.
You also have Hong Kong law.
You have Hong Kong, you have Hong Kong law. You have judges. You have this whole system of people or bureaucrats or whatever that are used to this sort of standard British rule of law legal system that's now being used to do things that are clearly not right according to that system.
And it happened very fast. The old system fell apart immediately. It's how democracy dies. Not that Hong Kong was a democracy.
Yeah, well, but and it died so quickly. So how does that actually happen? What's the mechanism for force? How does an authoritarian system force this change on a free system so quickly?
Mm. Well, you're right to point out the speed of it. I think that's what's so shocking. I think the only explanation really is just that they have created this intense climate of fear that people who previously were absolutely defenders of the rule of law and of an open, free society are afraid of the consequences if they don't implement what they're being asked to do. And so, for example, people in the judiciary and the legal profession in Hong Kong basically have one of two choices. And to be fair to them, many of them did speak out for as long as they could before it became too dangerous. But now they really face two choices. One is to leave Hong Kong, which many have. The other is to do what the regime is asking them to do. And I think that's probably the explanation for why it's happened so fast.
I guess it's interesting because it's people who are sort of they're unhappy with it, but they're not willing to go so far as to quit or leave, like their freedom of speech has already been taken away, so they can't talk about it. The freedom of the press has been taken away, so none of the media locally are going to report on it. They can't even put up a blank white piece of paper and protest, right? Like if they get punished or if they want to express their fear of this system, like that's already been taken away, right?
And what's interesting here is that I don't think that there's actually been a national security law case that's gone to trial yet, right?
I think that's correct, actually, yes.
So they've managed to essentially start dismantling the system without actually, like they've charged people. Those people are in prison, but they haven't been tried. So they haven't actually fully used the
system. They're all sitting in, they're for up to 2 years, they've all been sitting in jail.
I don't know
that
they charged people right away, but in the last 2 years, they've definitely charged people. And I think there was a case just recently where they revoked somebody's bail, right? Where she had been out on bail and then they revoked the bail and she had to go to prison.
But I guess what's interesting about that is you can use the system of detaining people pre-trial and denying bail, which already exists within the system, although, as you point out, Benedict, it wasn't used that much to deny people bail. But you can use that to detain people for, 6 months or a year or 2 years. It's very punishing. It's very disruptive to their lives, especially for someone who's totally innocent, right? And then
I don't know if anybody's going to be totally innocent under the national security law.
Well, yeah, but they're morally innocent, right? And then, okay, so they're detained for a year and then released, knowing that they could always be charged again with some other violation of the national security law. And so, without ever going to trial, theoretically, you could keep all these people in line with a legal system that allows you to detain people pre-trial.
No, I completely agree. And the other thing to say is that, of course, with a number of these cases, they're piling on the charges to make sure that they stay in prison for as long as possible and potentially, forever. So in the case of Jimmy Lai, he faces national security law charges, but a number of other charges under other laws. I think the same is true of, I don't think Joshua Wong actually has been charged yet under the national security law, but he's been given a pile of, and every time he completes one sentence, they add on another charge. So it's not just the national security law; they're using all the laws they can to just add on charges.
And this is the thing that worries me. We talked about how the change in Hong Kong happened so fast; it happened almost overnight. And so right now we're laughing about how they've sentenced you to life in prison. But the scary thing is the Chinese Communist Party wants to be the world superpower. They want to control things, and they have been gradually expanding their influence over the years. And so right now we can say, the idea that they could, sentence someone in another sovereign country to life in prison, that's ridiculous. But they want to be able to get to the point where they can actually do that.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. And that's why it's so important that particularly democratic countries around the world really wake up to this, speak out, act, and do so together. I think China's very skilled at playing countries off each other or retaliating against an individual country that has taken a stand. But if democracies coordinate more together and take a stand, and actually there was in a very small way, there was a little bit of an example of that earlier this week. The Canadian High Commission in London asked me at short notice to if I would come in to brief them, and I thought initially it was just with Canadian diplomats, but they then invited several other countries: the Australians, New Zealanders, the US Embassy, Japan, and the European Union, and that was really welcome. That I had a chance to talk to all of these diplomats from different countries in one room. And even more encouraging, the Canadians said they wanted to take a photograph of me and a colleague with a Canadian backdrop so that they could tweet it and express their support for us. And other embassies retweeted it. So that's a very small anecdote. But I mean, I think the point is, the free world needs to stand together in the face of this growing challenge.
I bet Regina Ip hated that. But so what are some of the ways the Chinese Communist Party is trying to gain this level of control that they ultimately want?
Well, I think it's, of course, economic coercion, encouraging countries to become overly reliant on China and then using that to threaten them. It's their influence in the United Nations and other multilateral organizations. Of course, the pandemic has really brought to light the challenges of the fact that COVID-19 came about not because of anything to do with the Chinese people, but because the Chinese Communist Party regime was, well, to put it at best, negligent and failed to alert the world in time. But then, of course, they're making all the PPE that we all needed during the pandemic. So it's those sort of ways that they're extending their influence.
How about Interpol?
Interpol is definitely a key concern, and actually, I'm certainly looking into what can be done in my own case to prevent, for example, red notices being put out, which it's highly unlikely that European countries, for example, would actually extradite me. But it's not inconceivable that if the Chinese put a red notice out in Interpol, my travel in Europe to those countries that still have extradition agreements with both China or Hong Kong might be, more inconvenient. I might potentially be detained, and that's happened, for example, with Bill Browder, a prominent critic of Putin. He's actually been stopped and detained in certain European countries, and then, of course, there are countries further afield that probably would extradite a person. And this isn't just about me. This has happened already to Chinese dissidents, to Uyghurs, and others. So, China's influence in Interpol is a major concern. And I mean, Interpol couldn't even protect, as you'll recall, its own previous president, who was Chinese, when the regime decided they wanted him back. Interpol couldn't protect him. So China's influence in Interpol is definitely a concern.
Yeah, I think a lot of people might find it far-fetched that, the Chinese Communist Party, China could have that kind of level of control where they could actually arrest, a foreign citizen. But yeah, look at Interpol. The current president is Chinese, right?
Yeah, they elected another Chinese.
Yeah, after the last one was kidnapped by China, the last Chinese.
He obviously wasn't good enough.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, there's cases of Interpol being used by authoritarian regimes.
Bill Browder is American, right?
That's right. He's American, and he also has British citizenship and based in the UK.
So, yeah, this is a very clear way of if these authoritarian regimes gain control of international institutions like Interpol, the international police, essentially, in a way, that could actually start affecting the world. Really, since the end of the Cold War, I think there was this sort of complacency or arrogance that happened in the West where it's we're at the end of history, liberal democracies have won. And I think a lot of people just don't believe China or Russia could ever challenge that there could be a situation where liberal democracies are no longer the dominant power in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think Russia's invasion of Ukraine and China's apparent support for that, although they've been playing it a bit slightly ambiguously in recent days. But that whole situation really brings to light that we're in a profound struggle between free, democratic, open societies on the one hand and authoritarianism in the other. And I think if there's one good thing that's come from both the tragedy in Ukraine and the increasing aggressiveness of China, it is that Western democracies are starting to wake up. it may be rather late in the day, but I think they are starting to, and they're starting to show more unity, and that's this could be a turning point for good.
How do you think China is reacting to how the West reacted to Russia's invasion of Ukraine?
Yeah, that's a great question. On the day of the invasion, I was asked by the Daily Telegraph in London to write an article for them on what Ukraine might mean for Taiwan. And this was before the West kind of started to get its act together. And I wrote in that article, the opening line was, Xi Jinping will be watching the West's response to the Ukraine invasion very closely. And if our response is weak, he will be emboldened. I think, but it's probably too early to tell, but I think that the fairly, to me, pleasantly surprising way in which actually the West did start to react more strongly and more swiftly in both senses of the word.
That's a very particular type of pun.
And particularly Germany's complete turnaround. I hope that will have sent Xi Jinping a signal that will give him pause for thought, and also, of course, the fact that the invasion has not gone entirely Putin's way. So let's hope that is a cautionary note for Beijing.
I think there's really only one possible explanation for this, which is that everyone from those countries read your article.
That's what got the German chancellor. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how else to explain Germany.
I had read in the Washington Post that it was like President Zelensky from Ukraine like pleading with the European Union that made a big difference. But who knows if that's true or not?
No, I think it was Benedict's article. Yeah.
I would give much more credit to President Zelensky, I think.
I do think that there's something interesting here, though, that like while we hope that Xi Jinping and the Chinese Communist Party, they've looked at this and been like, oh, this might not be as easy as we think. I don't think we should be complacent that this has actually stopped them or paused them in a meaningful way, because there is definitely, I think we see this in Russia's invasion of Ukraine too, where there's like a level of arrogance, right? For Putin thinking that like, oh, well, obviously this is just going to be another special military operation where it's going to happen really fast and nobody's going to really respond to it. And I could totally see the Chinese Communist Party looking at what happened with Russia and Ukraine going, well, yeah, they messed that up. But, when we take Taiwan, we're going to do it better. We are going to get Taiwan much faster. We're going to learn from their mistakes. We're going to make sure we're off the international monetary system. Like, we're just going to make sure that when we do it, we're going to do it way better than Russia did.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. We certainly shouldn't be complacent. And I think we were too complacent, even though all the warning signs of the invasion of Ukraine were there. We kept thinking that it wasn't going to happen. So absolutely, complacency should be off the table. And as you say, I think China could well be looking at this and learning lessons. I mean, they did the same in a way when the Soviet Union collapsed, and they learned lessons from that because they were determined not to allow the same thing to happen to them.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I'll say to the Communist Party's credit is they're very clever. They're very good at sort of duct taping up bad situations, and they're very good at learning from other people's mistakes. And I know that doesn't explain all of their behavior, but like every crisis that has beset China over the last 2 decades that I've been following it, like I'm always awe is maybe the wrong word, but it's always a surprise to me how well they're able to sort of deal with some problem that they have caused, for example. Kind of like, economic crisis. Well, they've come up with this solution to solve it. And yes, maybe that'll create more problems, but then they end up figuring out a way to solve that, right? Even the Hong Kong problem, which is that people were protesting, like they solved it with the national security law. And that's created a new set of problems, but they're also in the process of solving that new set of problems.
Well, this is something we've talked about on China Uncensored, like how China is trying to use the Russian invasion of Ukraine for its own advancement, that they're trying to essentially turn Russia into a North Korea kind of situation where, like with North Korea, China can be the middleman, the intermediary, the only ones who can get Russia to listen to them. And so China then becomes very important in this whole kind of geopolitical game of chess.
Yeah, we need China to help us work with Russia and mediate this. If we got to rely on, because Xi Jinping and Putin are such good friends.
Yeah, absolutely right. I think they're extremely skilled at, and just when we were beginning to make progress in people waking up to the challenge and the threat of China, along comes Russia, and people are saying we need China. They say the same over climate change. So yeah, I agree. They play that very well.
And this is the big question. After Russia invaded Ukraine, you heard people saying, "Oh, it's worth spending a little more money to stop to be less reliant on Russia to stop Russia." And it's like, why haven't they been saying that about China ever?
Because we're way more reliant on China than we are on Russia.
Yeah. And so the question is, if China were to invade Taiwan, would we have that same attitude?
Mm.
Maybe we'll be pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, let's hope we are pleasantly surprised. But and let's hope also that we're not caught by surprise, which I think we were, even though we had a lot of warning with Ukraine. We should have been with Ukraine. We should have been actually putting sanctions on China before the invasion, not afterwards, and sending arms to the Ukrainians before the invasion, not afterwards. And so let's hope we can start doing the same with Taiwan to prevent it happening rather than reacting when it does happen.
Very true. Well, so one other thing I want to talk about is, since you are such a special person to the Chinese Communist Party, obviously, so many firsts for you, what do you think is next? How do they top life imprisonment?
Oh, for Benedict, you mean? What's next for Benedict? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I'm waiting to see. I don't know if you know that I'm working on a book at the moment, which basically looks at all the major human rights issues. So it's a long book covering Hong Kong, the Uyghurs, Tibet, the persecution of Christians, the persecution of Falun Gong, organ harvesting, the crackdown on civil society and lawyers, and then, of course, Taiwan as well. And that will come out towards the end of this year. And it'll be interesting to see how they react to that. It probably
so it's every third rail issue in one book.
Yes.
Perfect.
And it will probably come out either in time for or just after the plenum, the party plenum that's taking place later this year.
Well, that's exciting. I didn't know you were working on that book. We'll have to have you back on when that comes out.
Sounds pretty comprehensive.
Regina Ip's going to love it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Maybe you could get her to do a blurb.
Yes.
Get her to write the foreword for it. That'd be very nice. Actually, that'd be great because it would be like, do not read this book. It's horrible. It's totally full of lies.
Well,
you could put that, actually get her to tweet about it, which she might actually do. And then you can use that as the foreword to your book.
Absolutely.
Well, they are helping you sell this book. I mean, from The Wanted Fugitive, Benedict Rogers, comes a book the Chinese Communist Party doesn't want you to read.
Yeah, wow.
This is pretty good. Yeah. You'll be the next Tom Clancy.
Yeah, be sure to tell your publicist, to have you like that.
Reach out to Regina Ip and Carrie Lam, and it'll be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to point out, I think it's appropriate that, can we get the close-up on Matt real quick? That there's that little Lego Carrie Lam in the background where she's holding a gun. She looks like a little thug. We got that when we were in Hong Kong. We weren't banned from going to Hong Kong.
No.
But I'm a little nervous about setting foot in Hong Kong again.
I don't know. Maybe they don't even know we exist.
It's possible.
Yeah, they're really good, like pig cheek and noodle place that we went to.
Oh,
Oh,
are we
yes.
going to start reminiscing
But-
about Hong Kong? That's going
We'll
to get
save that
really
another
sad.
time. Well, Benedict, thanks for joining us again. I know a lot of people have been wanting to get you on to talk about this insanity, so I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us and share the story with our audience.
No, it's always a pleasure, and thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, and we'll definitely have to have you on either when your book comes out or when the Communist Party does the next stupid thing to you.
Absolutely.
So we'll have you on weekly, I'm sure. All right, talk to you next time.
Thank you so much.
You know, I kind of have a question. Do you think, because we were joking with Benedict earlier that he was obviously in the CIA because of how badly the Chinese regime wanted to go after him. Do you think they actually believe that there are all these people in the CIA, that the Hong Kong protests were actually started by the CIA?
You know, that's a good question. I kind of think that could be true. Because, you know, in China, like everything is political. There's always, you know, some double entendre or whatever. I wouldn't be surprised if they think everyone is as paranoid and crazy as they are.
And also actually sends people to go to other countries and set fire to statues they don't like.
Yeah, it's one of those things where they accuse others of what they do.
Yeah, this just occurred to me because I was reading something, you know, about the whole Russia accusing Ukraine of having bioweapons thing.
Mm-hmm.
There was somebody who was talking about how after the Soviet Union fell, the Soviet scientists and the former Soviet scientists and American scientists like visited each other's labs, and both were surprised because the Americans didn't know exactly the extent that the Soviet bioweapons warfare like was actually a thing. Like they didn't realize how much they were doing. And the former Soviets were like, oh, you don't have one.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you know, the US had signed the treaty to ban bioweapons back in 1972. But I think like the Soviet Union was just like, we're secretly doing it.
Surely
Everybody else must be secretly doing it too.
In fact, wasn't like the resurgence of smallpox a result of like Russian biolabs?
I don't know about that.
I'll have to look that up. I think there's something like that. But yeah, so I think it is a similar, like, I think you're right about the Chinese Communist Party. I don't know if you have any thoughts about that, Matt?
Oh, no, I was going to say what you said, except less articulately.
Ah. Well, one thing I think that's very important that came out of this episode is we got to make that scary panda T-shirt.
Ooh.
You know,
with the venom.
Fangs dripping with venom and claws.
The deadly sting of the panda.
And the sting. So it's going to have like a
sting
tail,
on the
a stinger
butt?
tail.
It could be anywhere. I'm imagining like a scorpion tail. Like you see the cute cuddly panda and then from out and back, boom, scorpion tail.
What if the T-shirt has the panda on the front and then the back is the back of the panda with the tail
I don't
sticking
believe
up?
we technically can make that.
Oh, we can.
Really?
We have we have our logo on the
I
back
think
of our shirts.
it'll
You know
cost
that,
a
right?
little more to print on both sides, like the full thing. But yeah, we could do it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, let us know in the comment section if you'd like that
They
T-shirt.
can be like wearing a little like CCP hat or something like that.
Oh, yeah, or Mao cap.
Or like
Yeah.
somehow you see it, but only from the back or something. I don't know. We've got
We're
obviously.
still concepting this,
We're still
obviously.
concepting, yeah.
I like how we like live on the show. We start brainstorming ideas. Like last time we had the spake fork.
That wasn't an
shirt.
idea. That was you guys making fun of me for misspeaking.
Yeah, that was, but it was a good idea.
I
I
forgot
think
about
I said
Spake Fork.
I said space fork, and then you started saying
And I tried to
spake-
make fun of you, and I said Spake
big
Fork.
fork.
And then
Yeah.
I just rolled with it.
At least
Yeah.
one person said in the comments that they would buy a Spake Fork T-shirt.
Then it's worth it.
Just for
Okay.
that one guy.
Scary Panda and Spake Fork.
I feel like Scary Panda is going to sell a little bit better.
Maybe.
Our best selling T-shirt is the Xi Jinping dressed as Winnie the Pooh.
That's great.
That's a classic.
Which you can get over at ChinaUncensored.tv/merchandise. There apparently are some problems with people not being able to get onto the website if they're not using Chrome. There's like, I guess some browsers won't display stuff. We have to figure that out.
We're working on it.
Yes.
We're a small team. I'm also realizing in this wide shot, I have the microphone thing entirely in front of my face.
You could move.
I can move, it can move, but you know, sometimes
Inertia, right?
Let me
Inertia.
talk so you have a chance to move that in
Okay.
your so one thing we were talking about how the CCP bullies people who are the CCP bullies people who are, trying to stand up to them, right? Whether it's Benedict Rogers or these Chinese dissidents. And they also bully countries in the exact same way,
What do you
where
mean?
like when they were like, okay, well, what we have to do to Benedict is to send letters to his neighbors to ostracize him and warn his neighbors that he's a dangerous person, right?
Mhm.
Like, think about what they do to Taiwan, where they're like, okay, well, what we need to do is isolate Taiwan. Nobody is allowed to do anything nice for Taiwan.
Mhm.
Even if it's just like trading more with Taiwan, like Lithuania tried, right? No, that's not okay. And then when Lithuania did it anyway, then it was something like, okay, now we're going to target Lithuania. Hey, EU, Lithuania's neighbors, if you guys trade with Lithuania, like kiss goodbye to trading with us, right?
They also wrote a letter to Benedict's mother. So who's Taiwan's mother in this scenario?
Actually,
Obviously, it's Beijing,
well, I guess from their
the motherland, right?
perspective,
Yeah. They should threaten themselves.
I mean, I guess historically you could argue that Taiwan is China's mother,
That's actually way more historically accurate. Yes.
Interesting.
but that's not what they mean when they say the motherland.
So China is just in sort of this rebellious phase where they're turning against their mother.
Well, they've been
Well,
in that phase since
I mean,
the Civil
they kind
War.
of kicked their mom out of the house, if we're going to really go with this
Well,
analogy.
they're really the unfilial son or daughter.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
I don't know where to go with this now.
Yeah, no,
I know. I
That's-
realize that we are now at lunchtime
Yeah.
and we are stupid.
Come on. We can end this strong.
All
We can
right.
stick the landing.
Okay. All right. Here we go. Got anything, Matt?
I think what we just need to do is all be vigilant about what the Communist Party is doing in other countries, and look at their tricks and then laugh at them.
And that's good enough. Thank you for watching China Unscripted. I'm Chris Chappell.
I'm Shelley Chung.
And I'm Matt Gnezda.
We'll talk to you next time.